Doing an acrylic today using the Meeden Heavy Body Basic paints. Got some burnt umber, some yellow ochre, burnt sienna. We've got some ultramarine blue, some purple, and some red, and some, this is ultramarine blue, and then Payne's gray. And here I'm using watercolor paper that's in a spiral bound pad. This is like 140-pound weight. I've had some people asking me what it is exactly that I'm painting on when I post these over on Instagram. And I find that using these pads are very portable, they're easy to store, and there's not a lot of pressure. These videos and my paintings are meant to be for a fun hobby or holiday, for stress relief and anxiety relief for me, and have a nice hobby, something that's easy and approachable. These are not, they can be museum masterpieces, but they're meant for fun and to have a good time. So it's meant to be low cost, not a lot of pressure for spending money. We're using Meeden Basic heavy body acrylics. They were given to me for free from Meeden and at no cost. And they're very inexpensive, very good quality. I've used them, a lot of fun to use, a lot of colors in the box. And here I'm using some of that brown and some of that red. I've laid out a sky here, and I'll probably go back to that, a little bit of yellow ochre. And I'm just putting in some foliage here. I make these up as I go along. Sometimes from a photo, or I'm driving around and I see some areas, maybe around my house or whatever. Do it for fun. You don't like it, you can always rip the page out of, I don't suggest you do, but you can always rip the page out of the notebook and toss it or do whatever if you don't like it. But I say save it, and you can kind of see if you're trying to improve your skills. But this is low pressure. And this year, we got winter coming up. I'm doing a winter scene, and I'm using some titanium white here, kind of blending that in. This is wet and wet for as long as it lasts, because acrylic dries very quickly. And you can use other products. You can use mediums, and you can use slow drying products if you want your acrylics to dry slower, or even use, paints that are slower drying. But I like the Meeden. I do like them. And I'm just basically going here, shooting from the hip. And I have these, as you saw in the beginning, I keep them in a stay wet palette. There's a little sponge underneath, and then there's a paper on top. It's called a membrane, which you soak in water. And then I spray them down periodically with a little water. This way, when I take the lid off, I have paints that are ready to go, and they're always wet and ready to go. My brushes, I'm using these brushes called chip brushes. I bought like a bag of them from Michael's. And they're just very inexpensive brushes. I think they use them for glues and padding and things like that. I like them because the bristles are not even. They're great for doing foliage. They do shed a lot. Once you break them in, you don't have that problem anymore. But they're very inexpensive. It's maybe 50 cents a brush. Taking care of your brushes, washing them and all that stuff, and worried about, spending a lot of money for that all just adds to the anxiety of it. We don't need that. So again, this is just for fun. We're doing a snow scene here. I've used a little yellow ochre. We've got grass kind of sticking up out of the snow, adding a little bit more snow in here. Just with the white, maybe just a little bit of red so it doesn't look like, it's stark white. And I'm just kind of tapping that in there. A little bit of shadowy things in there, maybe put a little purple underneath and then go over with white again. I find that makes the snow look a little more interesting. And it's, colors are a little transparent anyway. So if you've been watching my channel and you work with watercolor is a great medium. It's fun, it's approachable, it's easy to wash the brushes. Watercolor paint has become pretty expensive over the years. It is more expensive per milliliter, per mil, than a lot of the other paints. I feel that acrylic is very affordable. You get a large quantity, and it doesn't really matter if you use paints that are not artist grade necessarily, and you can still have a good time. You know, with watercolor, you want to use cotton paper, better pigment paints, and ultimately your results will be better. But something like this, you can use student grade, you can use like Meeden Basic, and you can still have great results and a good time. This is for hobby. This is for people wanting a hobby, maybe to sit down at their table and just paint something nice. And you can see the box over to the left, the Meeden acrylic paint there. And I use a little clip, I hold the page down, and then when I'm done and this is all dry, I flip to the next page and I have a whole book I can leave on my coffee table with paintings that I've done. Now I'm taking this sort of like a filbert brush, and I'm just kind of shaping this a little bit. Again, I make these up as I go. This is just, again, for fun. I can't stress that enough. This isn't me getting on here. You know, sometimes people leave comments, and this isn't me getting on here showing off that I'm some great artist or something. I want you to pick up a brush, and if this is too complicated, if it's hard and it looks like, oh, I could never do that, you're not going to try. And if you do try and your results fall short, you're not going to want to try again. Okay, so just going in with this filbert type brush, and I am laying in just some grassy things over here using the yellow ochre, maybe a touch of burnt umber. You know, when you get that dormant season for the grass, we do around where I live, you get that prairie grass, that brown sort of dormant grass, and when you get your snow, it tends to stick up and poke through the snow. So here, just going in and making little tips to the foliage, to the little bushes and things that are here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a little figure in here. I think it'd be nice to add a little figure, maybe walking through the snow, just to have a focal point. Little red jacket on, maybe. Just using a Meeden fine tip brush. This is a Meeden acrylic brush. They sent me these as well. Couple legs on the figure, and a little bit of a shadow underneath. And I find if I blend that with my finger, it just kind of looks more shadowy, just blend it so it's not as strong as the figure. And then I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pop maybe a little dog in here. Again, using the fine tip Meeden brush here. A little shadow under the dog. And again, just go for shapes. If you need to practice on like a separate piece of paper, figures, that's not a bad idea. Again, I'm painting on watercolor paper that's in a spiral bound pad. 140 pounds. Someone had asked me if it was 300 pound, which is a heavier paper. Ideally, if you're doing acrylic, you know, if you use a heavier paper and you want to frame it, I think that's probably not a bad idea. You know, it's a little more expensive. Again, I'm all about not having pressure on you when you paint. So this paper here, it's watercolor paper, and I haven't had an issue with it. I can frame it like a watercolor. I can glue it down maybe on a piece of wood, and I can use a regular type of frame, or I can frame it under glass with a mat. Either way, I have that choice if I decide to. I'm going to add a little bit more snow in here. And I'm going to leave a little of that purple that's there just because, you know, snow has that cold. You have a purple, like shadowy things happening. A little more around here just to kind of highlight it. You know, as white dries in either acrylic or watercolor, I notice it kind of tends to really dry down. And it loses a little bit of its intensity. I've had it in gouache. I've had it do that in watercolor and acrylic. And I find if you go back and just add a little bit more of a layer to it, then that works out very well. And I'm going to go ahead and do that in this sky as well. I'm going to kind of make the sky balanced out. I never really put in the full sky, at least when I'm doing an acrylic. I know I might go back to it if it doesn't really match up with what I have from the actual painting. Kind of blending a little bit. This is a 1.5 inch, I believe, chip brush. And I'm just going to highlight the figure here with a little bit of white too. So they stick out a little bit more. Touch up that red a little bit. This is probably a little boring for you, but you know, you spend as much time on these little details as you feel you need to. I got a little paint on the brush. I'm going to throw some little sticks and things in here. As always, if my hand is in the way, I do apologize. A few little long blades of grass. Okay, this is where I'm going to go in. I'm putting in a little pinkish white. We can just call it pink, I guess. And just kind of drawing that down. Sometimes what I'll do is I'm doing this, I'll soften the tops. One of the things about acrylic that I've found is that you have harder edges. Watercolor and oil tend to be a little softer around the edges. In oil, it just tends to have a softer look anyways. And so sometimes you add the white, you kind of blend it a little bit, it'll soften that down. Okay, here it is with the matte. I added a little more blue over the top of that to create that sky, and I think it's cohesive at the moment. And we'll go ahead and pop a couple birds in. I'm still going to use, just like my watercolor, my micron pen. And there's the finished piece. Just throw a little matte on there. Sign it, just like any other painting. And this is just an easy, beginner, fun acrylic on paper. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.